genocide is the red line. There is no such thing of a lesser than two evils. I don't like shaitan, so I'm going to vote for the Dajjal. We have a deeper problem in the American political landscape. I'm on the political minhaj of Malcolm X as a Sunni. Our over-engagement with the Democratic Party has got the American Muslim community nothing tangible. Who we vote for, including for president, is not just a dunyawi or worldly matter. We are going to be questioned by Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. We shouldn't have any problem engaging anyone as long as we are clear on our principles.
American Muslims are feeling an enormous burden of weight on their shoulders. The Gaza war has perturbed many of the holy cows that have previously dominated community discourse. The callousness with which the Biden-Harris administration has armed and abetted this genocide, and the equally detestable comments by Trump to finish off all Palestinians has led to a collective consciousness about the future of the Muslim American vote. But in a larger sense, it raises questions about whether American Muslims really can influence the system. Now, I've been struck by the thoughtful and nuanced conversations that are being had all across the United States, but there remains a confusion. One such community that probably has reason to be skeptical of mainstream Muslim organizations and their approach to politics as relationships are the all-important African American Muslim community, often very much neglected on the sidelines of conversations about Muslims in America. I've invited today onto the show someone who I deeply respect for the manner by which he thinks through these essential topics. Long before Gaza came along to haunt us, Imam Dawud Walid has been discussing the issues surrounding faith-based activism. Imam Dawud Walid is author of multiple books, including pertinent to today, Towards Sacred Activism. He is an Imam in Michigan, and he frequently lectures in Western countries about Islam and issues of social cohesion from the perspective of Islamic theology and spirituality. Imam Dawud Walid, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back to The Thinking Muslim.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. It's my pleasure being back on with you.
Well, Jazakallah khair. And actually, we're discussing a really important topic at a very important time, I suspect, for American Muslims. Now, Imam Dawud Walid, let me pick up on the last part of the introduction, the African American Muslim community. I recently came across a Yaqeen Institute survey that placed these brothers and sisters, this constituency, to be still quite likely to vote for, or at least more likely to vote for Harris than any other Muslim community, although a third of voters said that were surveyed said that they would still vote for Harris. Now, we can debate the accuracy of this, but what are you sensing on the ground in the African American community?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So this is a very pertinent question, and I'd like to make a delineation between African Americans and what are called Black Muslims in the United States of America. So the Yaqeen poll specifically is talking about African American Muslims such as myself, who are the descendants of the enslaved Africans brought here to the Americas. Hence, I would not classify myself an immigrant or a child of immigrants. So those are African American Muslims. Black Muslims would, in the American context, including the African diaspora of Muslims who reside in America. So that would include Muslims from Ethiopian background or Somali background or Senegalese, Mauritanian background, could all be lumped in as phenotypically Black or having connection to Africa. In saying that, according to that Yaqeen poll, 2/3 of African American Muslims are not supporting the Democratic Party, do not plan on voting for Vice President Harris to be the next president of these United States of America, despite there being a historical legacy of the majority of African American Muslims voting for a Democratic candidate. And I think that although the percentage of African American Muslims is for sure larger than Arab American Muslims who are going to vote for Kamala Harris, it shows that irrespective of national origin, racial identity or ethnicity, that the American Muslim community is appalled with the ongoing genocide taking place in Gaza. And for many of those Muslims, including African American Muslims, genocide is a red line. And there is no such thing of a lesser than two evils in this situation, as far as voting for Harris, as if this is saying that she is so much of a lesser evil or potential lesser evil than Trump.
That's really interesting. I come across a number of tweets and posts on social media which seem to portray this division between Black Muslims, African American Muslims on the one side, and the immigrant Muslims on the other. I mean, how much are these divisions exaggerated for impact, and how much of it is really devised by, I suppose, Democratic Party people?
So there's no doubt about it. There are issues of tribalism and racism within the American Muslim community. I think that what distinguishes America from other countries of Muslims in the West is about close to a third, or we could even say, if we want to have lesser numbers, let's say a quarter. Let's say a quarter of American Muslims are African Americans. So we're talking about an indigenized Muslim population with ancestors that go back in this country over 300 years, which is very different from the Muslim community in Canada or in the UK, two countries that I visited quite a bit. And inshallah, we'll get together in December when I come out to London, inshallah, as we've been together before in London. So I think that this is something that's very different in regards to a legacy. And there are issues of some historical tensions between, if we want to use the term indigenous versus immigrant within the American Muslim community. However, in regards to this issue of Palestine, there's unity across the board. And I would say probably at best, if there's 1%, I wouldn't even say 1%, maybe 0.1% of Muslims who are Zionists, there is no difference between African American Muslims, white American Muslims, Latino American Muslims, and those who are first, second, or third generation South Asian or Arab or Turkish when it comes to this issue of Palestine. Now, how that plays itself out in regards to voting, I take all Muslims as being against genocide. I have husnul dhan for the grassroots of the community. Some people believe that voting for Trump serves the interests better of the American Muslim community, right? And those people are against genocide. There are some people who believe that, okay, well, Harris is the lesser of the so-called two evils, but they believe having a seat at the table will somehow bring an end to the genocide, or long-term, maybe a better means of ending the occupation, or at least the advancement of more illegal outposts, so-called settlements. There's other people that are like, no, we need to break the duopoly. We need to vote for a third-party candidate, be it Dr. Jill Stein and Dr. Bilal Ware with the Green Party, or Dr. Cornel West and Melina Abdullah with their new party that started, or another third party, just so that the duopoly can be broken. But in general speaking, be it black or white, Arabi or Ajami, I think that a lot of the talk about racial tensions between Muslims over Gaza is not really founded in much facts on the ground.
Jazakallah khair. I think that's really reassuring. Now, many of my viewers may not know your position vis-a-vis electoral politics at this stage. Like I've read the letter that you co-signed with many of the Muslim shuyukh and imams of the country. But can you set out your position and what you are instructing, at least those people around you in Michigan, what you're instructing them or advising them to do in relation to this coming election?
So I've actually signed 2 letters, Habib. The first of those was a broad coalition of imams, and I was one of the initial signatories, along with Dr. Yasir Qadi, Hafizullah Ta'ala, Dr. Omar Suleiman, Hafidullah Ta'ala, Imam Tom, who you had on recently, Hafidullah Ta'ala. So we were some of the initial signers of that. My friend, Dr. Shadi al-Masri as well, Hafidullah Ta'ala, was a signer, instructing the community, or advising the community, I should say, to vote third party this election, not designating any one party in that letter. Okay, now, then just recently I signed onto another letter specifically of Black Muslims. And this letter of leaders and activists, this letter, however, was not a response to the 25 African Americans who signed a letter that was pro-Harris or encouraging people to vote for Harris. We were already planning some sort of communication to send out, and then that letter came out. So it may appear to be some people as a response, but it was more, number one, to give guidance to the community, encouraging voting third party, and particularly Muslims who are Black, but also with the hope of trying to break the false narrative, right, that has been perpetrated in the media, predominantly by corporate media in America, and one particular station that's really aligned with the Democratic Party. Because if anyone knows anything about American corporate media, they're basically Fox. They are the media arm for Ishab Field, Fox News. MSNBC and NBC are the media wing of Ishab Himar. So the media wing for Ishab Himar gave national media coverage to these 25 leaders, and I know about half of them, honorable brothers who I know them, and I believe that they thought that it was in the best interests of the Muslim community, to vote for Harris. But nonetheless, I signed onto the other letter that came out. So the guidance that I'm giving is that we have a deeper problem in the American political landscape than just what took place on October 7th, 2023, which has pushed many Muslims now towards wanting to vote for third party. I've been talking against the duopoly for quite a while, and that Muslims, we need to start showing leadership instead of falling underneath everyone else's umbrella under the guise of, well, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And my position is we should start trying to build our own table and invite other people to that table to a different political vision. And I think that we're in the process of having these conversations. And the first step is of breaking the Muslim psyche from the duopoly. And I'll quote something else too, and perhaps we can get them a little later, but I'm on the political minhaj of Malcolm X is a Sunni, right? I don't mean Malcolm in the nation. Malcolm X is a Sunni. And Malcolm X was neither aligned with the Democratic Party nor the Republican Party. He called the Republicans a wolf, and he called the Democrats foxes. And he says that the so-called liberals, are more likely to get the lamb chop, if you have sheep. But he said, just because you're at the table doesn't make you a diner. And it's quite clear that our over-engagement with the Democratic Party has got the American Muslim community nothing tangible, not just in regards to Palestine, but even on other issues that affect us domestically, like the growing watch list that American Muslims are overly targeted. Dearborn being the #1 city per capita of Muslims on the no-fly list and the so-called suspected terrorist watch list. When it comes to banking while Muslim and getting Muslim entrepreneurs getting their bank accounts closed, and even Muslim organizations, the Democrats have done nothing about this, and all of these sitting at the table have done absolutely nothing with this. And I can go into some other issues besides some of the broader issues of infringing on our religious liberties and pushing the so-called LGBTQ agenda that takes away the religious conscience of Muslims, and literally has Muslims in my state leaving the mental health profession because they would lose their licenses if they don't affirm people's gender dysphoria and other sexual confusion and gender confusion, right? So I haven't seen anything tangible for this so-called sitting at the table. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. We're getting devoured anyway. We're getting devoured. 1 out of every 4 American Muslims, according to the last Pew study, and I think it's higher now, people who are born into a Muslim family are apostating. They're leaving Islam by the time they turn adults. This is a catastrophe, right? And much of it has to do with the embrace of this overly aligned with so-called progressives and absorbing their liberal norms is leading Muslims to kufr. And so as an imam, domestically, if we look at the maqasid sharia, the objectives of the sacred law, domestically, our number 1 priority is hizbut deen, the protection of our deen, which includes our freedom of conscience and to be able to practice our religion freely without our girls being forced to be in dorm rooms with people who claim to be transgender or gender fluid people walking into locker rooms. And this has happened even to my daughter at a public university in Michigan. This is not speculative. This is something real that's going on. As far as our foreign policy agenda as Muslims, Hizbul Nafs is the first maqsad of the Sharia, right? The protection of life. So what's worse than genocide, right? So for this reason, I am encouraging Muslims, be they non-Black or Black, it's time for us to break the duopoly. It's time for us to show some leadership. We should be talking with everyone. We can talk with the party of the elephant and the party of the donkey, but there shouldn't be no bay'ah. We should have no wala for the Democratic Party. As a matter of fact, I believe to give blind allegiance to any political party in this secular democracy, I believe that it is blameworthy. It's blameworthy.
No, Jazakallah khair. I think that's really good. And that sort of leads on to a question I wanted to ask you, really about your book, Towards Sacred Activism. I think you, fortuitously, you discussed this idea of faith-based or sacred activism and the dangers of aligning oneself with both the right and the left. But I think probably you were reflecting at that stage on the way that some on the left were interrogating and harming the ideology, especially of young Muslims on university campuses and beyond, when engaging in activism, and they were getting sucked into a lifestyle and the social mores of the left. Can you please talk to that? Like, I think you talked about in your book how how politics is a sacred duty and must be formed and formulated on Islamic ulum, on Islamic knowledge, and we should be well aware and not become fodder for foreign ideologies. Can you talk to that for our viewers, please?
So before answering it directly, I want to say that to the viewers, especially American Muslims, that we should not be absorbing that which Western Europe has propagated in the name of liberalism. We should not make that normative to the extent that it literally becomes part of like our de facto creed. And what do I mean? I mean this whole idea that we have a sacred life and a secular life, or we have a religious life that is void of being informing politics, right? This is actually something that comes out of Western European thought. Dare I say, it actually is something that comes from the thought of white supremacists, right? Because it is the white supremacists who are the ones that came up with this idea of actually stripping the sacred and coming up with this spear of the profane in the political life, right? It's actually informed by people who are white supremacists. Okay, so just saying this, there's always been a tradition in Islam of ahkam sultaniya, right? The rules and regulations of how to deal with governmental authority. This has been always written about in early Islamic history from Islamic scholars, or talking about the fiqh of siyasi, of political matters. There's actually rules, around this, number one. So I have to say this whole idea about, scholars or imams should not be involved in politics. any political engagement in which ulama are not involved in the conversation is either going to advance something that is blameworthy or forbidden, or will cause unintended harm to Muslims, not just in America, but Muslims throughout the globe. I'm 100% sure of this, right? So this has to be discussed. And the imams and shuyukh have to be a part of the process of discussion, along with political organizers, activists, people who are educated in secular social work, and attorneys, so that we can have a more fuller view of how we prioritize things in our political engagement, and what are the actual shari'i and akhlaqi red lines of not just what we advocate for, but how we advocate, right? The scholars need to be involved in this particular matter. Now, when we're talking about specifically in this engagement of not overly engaging with the right or left, as far as like wholesale taking on their political platforms as a type of social political creed, I mentioned this in Towards Sacred Activism, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentions in the Qur'an, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا, right? That Allah made us the middle community, right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, خِيرُ الْأُمُورِ أَوْسَطُهَا, that the best of the matters in the middle. Now, what defines the middle, right? The middle is not defined for us by public opinion polls. The middle isn't, oh, well, the Republicans are to this one side, and the Democrats to this other side, so therefore we try to go into the secular middle. No, that's not what it means. We have our standards of objective truth. The Qur'an is objective truth. The authentic Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, especially those ahadith that are mutawatira, that is objective truth. And this is where we start off, and how we judge the middle, as Imam Ghazali Rahimahullah mentioned about this issue of moderation, is baina al-ifrat wa tafrit. It is between going to excess and also neglect, right? These are blameworthy when there's something that is inside of our framework of al-iman wa islam wa ihsan, and going to excess, then this is blameworthy. And then likewise, going too far to this side, in which there is neglect, and even we could say apathy, then this also becomes blameworthy. And we see this in political circles right here in America. We have on the one side people going in a certain type of excess in politics, where activism is not part of the religion. Activism has become the religion, right? Advocating for a secular Palestinian state, that is the religion. That is the religion in and of itself. That's what's most important. So then how we get there, in the means itself, can lead to an excess. So we have people who are like, there's a lot of neo-Marxist informed activism in the community. And I believe that that is one extreme. Another extreme is, just make prayer. Don't get involved in these matters of encampments or protests. Stay clear away from the political matters. Just pray and remove your bid'ah, or just pray and go in the khalwa. And then that's what tafrit, right? And we see this amongst some of the neo-Salafis in the American Muslim community, and some of the neo-traditionalists who call themselves Sufis. I don't mean true tasawwuf. Inshallah, ana mutasawwuf. Inshallah, I'm not a Sufi, but I wish I was. But I'm speaking of these so-called people who want to be so righteous, and that all they just do is sit amongst themselves and judge everyone else, and just want to make dhikr or dua, or be the bid'ah police, right? That's to another extreme. And so we should try to strive to be in the middle, in my perspective, and Allah knows best.
That's a wonderful way to position the Muslim Ummah and to position the way in which we do politics. I think I would really recommend that our viewers pick up your book and read it, especially young activists. I was heartened, by the way, the other day. I was had a meeting with some young activists, and they were all quoting sacred activism as a basis for their relationships with allies on university campus. So, alhamdulillah, I think that the message is going around. Jazakallah khair.
Right.
On that, you're from Michigan, and of course, Michigan seems to be the key battleground state here. Donald Trump is constantly visiting and meeting with the Arab Muslim community, amongst others, and as well as that, Kamala Harris is giving speeches and sending out conciliatory messages to the Muslim community, so-called on Palestine, but we know on both sides a lot of this is deep cynicism. But let's talk about the Trump issue, because there are a number of Muslims in Michigan who have come out very explicitly in favor of Trump in this election, and they've asked others to vote for Trump in the election. I mean, how do you respond to these people who are maybe naive? I don't know if that's an unfair way of describing them, but at least who are unable to move beyond the duopoly, as you say.
Yeah. So before answering that, because I have personal relationships with some of those people in Michigan, I just like to say that no matter if someone plans on voting for Trump or Harris or third party or not vote at all, that we as Muslims need to, again, not be involved in social political takfir. These are all our brothers and our sisters. We should have a good opinion about what they're doing, and no one should be called a sellout or an Uncle Tom, for instance, because they say that they want to vote for Mr. Trump to be the 47th president of these United States of America, because there is talk like that, oh, these people are Uncle Toms, these people are sellouts, how can they vote for the orange man, and things such as this. Now, these people who are Arab Americans and are Muslims, as a matter of fact, there's a poll just came out recently, beloved, that says that now in polling, just this past week, that Arab Americans are polling as voting more for Harris. Excuse me. Arab Americans are polling higher for voting for Trump than Harris.
Wow.
Now that's shocking, but keep in mind that a little over half of Arab Americans, about 55%, are Christians, right? So they're not all Muslims. Then some of them are Drew or identify as Druze and other things, right? But here in Michigan, there are a significant amount of Muslims who will be voting for Trump. My former physician is the mayor of Hamtramck, Mayor Ghalib. He's an immigrant from Yemen, and he has met with Mr. Trump more than one time and has endorsed him. The mayor of Dearborn Heights, Mayor Bill Bezzi, I know him personally as well. He just endorsed Trump. And there are a lot of people within the Yemeni and the Lebanese community in particular, Sunni and Shi'i, who will most likely be voting for Trump. They believe that not necessarily in breaking the duopoly. They believe betrayed by the Democratic Party. By the way, both of those mayors are Democrats. Yeah. They're not Republicans. Yeah. They believe that for the Democrats giving so much aid to the Israeli government in regards to this genocide, they believe that Vice President Harris needs to be punished. And I believe this is the words that our brother Sami Hamdi, may Allah preserve him, has said. So they believe that the most efficient way of punishing Harris is not voting for Green Party or not sitting at home. It is to vote for Trump to ensure that Trump wins Michigan, because out of the 9 scenarios for winning the electoral college, who names the president, 6 of those scenarios at best say that if Harris wins Michigan, she becomes president. But if she loses Michigan, the odds are very high that she cannot win. So they say, let's punish Harris by voting for Trump. For myself, and I believe that a lot of this issue of voting on particular candidates is an issue of speculation, right? And what is most important, number one, is our intention. If people are voting for if people are voting for Trump to punish Harris, I can't blame them for that political calculation. We have a in one of the Qawaid al-Kulliyya al-Fiqhiyya, there is a maxim that's in most books of Islamic law. It starts off la thawaba illa binniya, meaning that there's no reward except by intention. So if the intention is not being pleased with Trump, who's a miscreant, he's a mujrim, he's a fasiq, no doubt about it, right? You're not pleased with him, but you're doing it for a political calculus, not because you have wala for Trump. Okay, then, I can't blame someone for that, though I think there's a step further we need to go in our calculations. But what I would say is that, number one, in regards to this point, I remind my brothers and sisters in regards to this issue of politics and voting, that who we vote for, including for president, is not just a dunyawi or worldly matter. Who we vote for, we are going to be questioned by Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala for every single thing that we do in this dunya, starting what's in our heart and our intentions, and then our speech and actions. There's hisab on all of it, every single thing, right? So that's one thing that we need to factor in. And again, as I said, sometimes there is no lesser than 2 evils, right? It's like making the argument, I don't like shaitan, so I'm going to vote for Dajjal. Sometimes there's no clearer than 2 evils, right? And before I get to the second point, this relates to something I just gave the khutbah about last week, that when Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, rahmatullahi alayhi, was imprisoned by al-Mu'tasim al-Abbasi. He was in prison. And there was a prison guard. It's a famous story. It's narrated by Ibn al-Jawzi in more than one of his books, that the prison guard came to Imam Ahmed, rahmatullahi alayhi, and he asked Imam Ahmed, he says, is the hadith about the one who helps oppressors, is it sahih? Imam Ahmed said, yes, it is authentic. The prison guard asked, am I from the helpers of the oppressors? Imam Ahmed said, no. He said, the one who grooms your hair or cuts your hair and washes your clothes, right? And prepares your food and buys from you and sells to you. Buys and sells, does business with you. This is the helper of the oppressors. He says, but no, you are from them. You are an oppressor. Even though the prison guard did not order Imam Ahmed into prison. But he was not a passive participant. He was actively involved in the act. So for me, I can't endorse Trump. I can't endorse Harris, because to me, this is actually signing up, or this is active, like being an active part of being an oppressor, right? Now, I have enough to answer for on the day of judgment, and we all do. And we should worry and be careful and fearful in front of Allah Ta'ala that we are not doing things, including with our votes, that we could be written down as, I don't know, as a aid or helper of the Dhalimeen, in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam clearly says that he will turn away from al-hawd, right? That this is an individual that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam won't even want to look at on the day of judgment. There's a person who's not going to drink from the hand of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That should scare us to death. Really, right? I've lost sleep about this. This is one thing, right? So there's hisab on it. The second thing is in regards to Trump. We should believe people when they tell us who they are. And Trump is no friend of the American Muslim community or Muslims globally. And I haven't seen any sounds of Tawbah. As a matter of fact, when Trump ran for president the first time, he was asked, has he ever asked God for forgiveness and done Tawbah or repented? He says he's never repented. He never made Tawbah to Allah. This is scary, right? Obama started the drone warfare and the incessant bombing and supporting two Arab governments in regards to Yemen. Obama was directly involved with that, arming it, giving logistical support. Trump continued it, and a blockade on Yemen in which Yemeni babies starved, cholera outbreak. Yemen was already the poorest country in the Arab world even before the bombing and the cutting off of food and medical supplies, right? So Trump was a part of that, right? And some other things relating to domestic policy in regards to Muslims. Ironically, though, Trump did speak up on behalf of the Uyghurs or Uyghurs. I'm not the proper way of pronouncing it. I've heard it pronounced more than one way. Whereas the Democrats didn't speak up at all for our Muslim brothers and sisters being oppressed by the Chinese government. But Trump did that, right? So my point is that Trump is immoral. He's no friend of Muslims. And I can't see, voting for that criminal and that miscreant just because I'm against another person who is who's a bold-faced liar and literally sleeping with the enemy, right? Trump. I don't think if this had happened and Trump was in the White House, I think Netanyahu would be doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, that's completely right. Now, when we think about Gaza, we lose sleep over it, and it's really an assault on defenseless people and our Islamic sensibilities and our connection of our ummah implore us to do something about it. And as a result, many Muslims have been engaged in encampments and protests and forms of activism that enable and allow them to raise their voices. And alhamdulillah, this is a good thing, as you mentioned previously. You touched on this before, but I want to focus on the relationship with the left and how we go from here, because of course many of those conscientious people and really good people actually who have been fighting for justice come from the left, and many of the organized activities, especially here in the UK, the organized marches and protests towards and for our brothers and sisters in Gaza has been organized with the left. Do you feel that in any shape or form that poses a danger for us as a Muslim community? And if it doesn't, if there is a way through navigating through that, how should we tread that relationship and navigate that relationship with the left, many of whom may belong to quite strong Marxist groups and progressive groups who on other matters actually disagree with us quite fundamentally.
Right. Yeah, I wrote about this in my book, Towards Sacred Activism.
Yeah.
And before getting to this point, I would just tell people that we should not write off everyone on the right. And there are certain things that we can agree with them about. And even you see some popular people on the right, commentators, podcasters, people who have political capital in America, whether we agree with all their views or not, like Candace Owens, even Tucker Carlson, who just spoke at a Trump rally recently. You know, they have an anti-globalist agenda, an America First agenda, and they're actually for cutting off arms to Israel and questioning actually what's going on. So there is that strain on the right. There are people who are libertarians and even some so-called America First people who aren't hardcore Christian Zionists, who actually are in favor of America taking a more active role in stopping the genocide and stopping with the arms. So I just had to say that. Now, in regards to the political left, we shouldn't have any problem engaging anyone as long as we are clear on our principles, right? Then we can engage anyone in a strategic way. The problem is that in the name of getting so-called allyship and support, looking for numbers, many Muslims have given themselves to the left and actually look at people who come for so-called solidarity as our saviors. And this is a real problem. For the viewers' history, for those who are younger, in the election that goes back in the year 2000, the majority of American Muslims actually voted Republican. They voted for George W. Bush for president. The only ones that didn't vote for George Bush were really African Americans that were affiliated with Imam Morfdi Muhammad's Jamaat. May Allah's mercy be upon Imam Morfdi Muhammad, who was one of my teachers when I was younger. So Muslims incline more towards Republicans as a whole, like just back in that generation. I mean, for a number of reasons. I mean, number one, the issue of wars abroad, and many of the Muslims saw Bush as being better on our issues, in particular Palestine, than the Democrats, because historically speaking, the Zionist movement has been stronger amongst Democrats historically than Republicans. It's only been more recent in the Republican Party and the rise of the evangelical right, where it's gotten stronger. The Zionist influence in both parties has increased more so on the right. So this is one reason. The other reason was social values, you know, in regards to traditional marriage, in regards to abortion, public morality, being against prostitution, which people on the left now are trying to repackage as sex work. They say sex work is real work, and things like that. Muslims saw themselves align more with the right or Republicans, you know, more than the left at that time. And then also during the Clinton administration, there was something started called secret evidence, which basically took away the due process rights of American citizens. And this was targeted at Muslims. So before the Patriot Act, there was this whole secret evidence thing. And Bush and many Republicans who talked about limited government, he ran on the promise that he would undo secret evidence. He got into office, then 9/11 happened. And then the right made a sharp, not only rhetorical, but policy, took policy positions that were hostile towards Muslims domestically and abroad, from rush deportations and people being taken away from their families, the Patriot Act, then the invasion of Afghanistan, and then the invasion of Iraq. So those two invasions, right? which prompted American Muslims to make a sharp turn to the Democrats, a sharp turn, feeling out of necessity. Bush wasn't talking to Muslims anymore, you know, even though Muslims were campaigning for him and giving campaign contributions. There was one leading Muslim academic, Dr. Samuel Arian, who literally had Bush's phone number and met him at the tarmac and was raising money for Bush, got put in prison, and then he got deported. I think he may be in Qatar now.
Turkey,
Yeah, or he's in Turkey now. Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Samuel Arian, went through his whole ordeal. So the Muslims ran to the left and out of political expediency. But what happened was a whole generation of Muslims who were young, who saw this type of engagement, interfaith dialogues, and much of it turned into like theological relativism, engagement of the left as so-called allies. Then foundations that were affiliated with the left or Democratic Party adjacent began to fund fellowships and trainings for young Muslims to be organizers and activists. And then we had Muslim organizations that were pre-existing started getting this lefty money. And even new organizations and platforms that never existed were started, not even funded by the Muslim community, their seed money, funded by democratically aligned foundations. And these people were trained by these people, went through their trainings, got awards, and as I say, who funds you runs you. And there was a whole generation of young Muslims that were socially engineered into aligning with so-called progressive values. Some of those that we could say are Islamically congruent, but others of them are not congruent. They are anti-Islam. And I say not anti-Muslim, I say anti-Islam, right? But the starting point for even those that are congruent is not starting with Islam as an actual worldview. It's actually starting from a leftist, neo-Marxist, or postmodern perspective, right? And this is part of the problem. Even when we see this issue of Gaza, there appears even to be unity in regards to voting third party, but there are different Muslims starting from different places. The mabda that one group is starting from is different from another. Even within this, although all of them would say vote third party or green party, but there's different drives and motivations even behind this, right? And this is why I saw this starting to take place in the American Muslim community back like in 2010, 2011. And I talked with some scholars here. I talked with some of my teachers, including overseas in West Africa. And that's the reason, or the origin for the book Towards Sacred Activism, was to be like a type of tool along with teaching, classes and going around. Instead of complaining about what the left is doing, the social engineering, that we need to do some Qur'an and Sunnah tarbiyah in our community, and we can say some prophetic engineering within inside of our community to try to bring our community back to the wasat, back to the middle ground. And that's really my focus. Has been predominantly on focusing on young people, right? People my age. I don't really spend too much time trying to convince someone who's starting to have gray in their beard, but it's the younger people in middle school, high school, the young people starting in undergrad, like in university. These are people that I'm reaching out to regarding Towards Sacred Activism, and even in regards to the book that I wrote, Fatwa, on Islamic sacred chivalry, right? It's not really focused on people in my generation. It's more focused for the younger people.
Inshallah, when you come to London in December, I would like to talk to you about chivalry in Islam, and in particular how the opposite of Islamic manhood or chivalry is framing a lot of a conversation, especially amongst young Muslim men, as you write about, and inshallah we shall try to do that. Now, back to the discussion about the left. Just one last question on the left, and that is that it is often the case, Imam, even after what you've said about the left and the dangers of the left, and I've been talking about this for some years as well. It is the case that when it comes to practical activism, that's missing in our communities. The mosque goers, according to one survey I read of American Muslims, are the least likely to be involved in political activism than those who don't attend the mosque, for example. And so there is this quietism or this apolitical Islam that comes with or is associated with a lot of Western Muslim practice. And so young people, when they visit the university campuses, I mean, here in Britain, we've got a horrid situation where on Gaza, only a handful, I mean, I can probably count it on one hand, only a handful of Islamic societies have actually been very active in forget about encampments and anything like that, but just active in raising the issue of Gaza because they're afraid to talk about Gaza, or they don't think it's an important activity to be engaged in. And so I suppose my question is, in the absence of that, people are going to gravitate towards these foreign ideologies. How do we re-inform the Muslim community, especially young Muslim communities, to be involved in sacred activism in a practical way beyond the classroom?
So what I would say is that at least here in the States, I can't speak for UK or Canada, but the genocide has really woken up a lot of people, and the need of Muslims to get involved or get more involved, we should say, in regards to some sort of activism, and activism that's based around an Islamic paradigm. So that's number one. So there is at least the need in some discussions, and like I know, like even right now, and I spoke with Sheikh Yahya Rodis about this not too long ago, who runs a Maqasid in Pennsylvania, and I spoke also with Sidi Amjad Tarsin. May Allah preserve them both. Like right now, they're teaching specifically from Ihya al-Muddin by Imam Ghazali. They're teaching the chapter on al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy al-munkar, on enjoining good, forbidding evil, because they recognize, as a number of our mashayikh recognize, that if we don't start talking about these things and teaching these things from the Islamic paradigm, that there's a vacuum. And young people are energetic and they want to get involved. So if the mashayikh aren't teaching from the tradition and teaching from the classical books, but giving contemporary examples and in proper ways, using proper means of this activism, then it'll be a situation where people who lack much ihtiram for Islamic tradition, or may only be so-called secular Muslims or ethnic Muslims, will be the people who are remaining as dominant in much of these activism spaces, right? So there is some discussion about it. It's time. Normally when you have a pendulum on the clock, it goes all the way up, and then it takes a while to go back this way until it settles down in the middle. So we've been at one extreme that took us to another extreme. We had total apolitical Islam, where the majority of the Muslim community was apolitical for a long time. Then Muslims started getting more politicized, which took us to the extreme to the left in neo-Marxist sentiments. And now we'll come to the middle. But also, those people who are grounded in the tradition need to go out to the campuses, need to actually be at some of these rallies, and to actually assume their natural place and assume some leadership, in how they talk, and also their adab or their mannerisms. As was mentioned, you have many people who are Marxists or far to the left, and these people come out and they will protest, and they will raise their voices, And also, these people need dawah,
Yeah.
and they need to be not invited to Islam only to be told about the articles of faith, right? But to also, through our actions, through our activism, be shown another way that's prophetic about how we truly care about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation, but also that we have what we could say um, different levels, different issues of concern and priorities, and how we prioritize those, and the wisdom that we use in seeking to center those priorities. There's much that we can offer, but if we're absent from the game, so to speak, right, then we can't score. If we're talking about like a football game, right? If we're not even on the field, how can we score a goal? And I think that this is one of the things that I invite those who are who are watching this right now, especially amongst the mashayikh and the du'at, to take more attention, in regards to this. And hence, I would just point back to something on Muslim Matters. This is why the Honorable Sheikh and I, the Honorable Sheikh Dr. Hatem Al-Hajj, Hafizah Ta'ala Al-Hanbali, we wrote a letter, or an article on Muslim Matters, talking about this issue of prophetic root activism and how we can't be negligent, but also, certain red lines that we should not cross. And, when honorable men such as Dr. Hatem Al-Hajj and people across the madhab, not just a Maliki or a Hanbali, but others are writing about this and talking about this, and also speaking about it on the pulpits, then inshallah, this will have some long-term benefit.
Inshallah. Now, I want to wrap this up by discussing the tarbiyah you talk about, because, of course, if young Muslims in particular, if they don't have the requisite Islamic knowledge and know-how before they enter those secular spaces, those activism spaces, then there will be an absence of any filters to engage with these foreign or these ideologies that they come across. And so it's easier then for them to embrace those ideologies. Now, I was struck by, I think it was in your book, or one of your writings, where you spoke about the need to study usul al-fiqh, or at least to be acquainted with usul al-fiqh as a discipline. We associate usul al-fiqh to be a quite a highbrow discipline that's studied by students of knowledge in second, third, fourth year of their degrees in Islamic ulum. Your argument is that maybe usul al-fiqh should be more broadly studied by Muslims. I'm intrigued by that. Explain why we should all study, or at least many of us should study usul al-fiqh.
Well, I would say, number one, anyone leading a Islamic organization or claiming to serve the Muslim community should be a student of knowledge. They should be a student of knowledge, right? Because it is the Sharia or the sacred law, both in its objectives as well as in its priorities, that should be informing our activism, right? It's not only our red lines, but what do we prioritize? There needs to be some sort of methodology. It just can't be feelings, right? So this is number one. And so this is just across the board, right? There should be students of knowledge, and, we need to strive for ihsan and do better, right? And just because someone is sincere and want to do activism about an issue, that should not be enough. Just as someone has a secular degree to do this or do that, there also should be some Islamic literacy, and then beyond just knowing the pillars of faith and the basic fard ayn of like how to make wudu and how to make salah, right? We need to strive for more. And one of my teachers told me this years ago, Allah marhamu. He passed away about 6 or 7 years ago, Sheikh Salim. And he said to me one day, it was so long ago, it was in the 90s. He said to me, remember, he said, Dawud, you can be sincere and be sincerely wrong. Sincerity is not enough. And this is why we need knowledge, and we need a framework of how to apply that knowledge, right? So this is one thing. The tarbiyah, number one, if we look at the Hadith Jibril alayhi salam, and the tartib in particular, the order narrated by Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, because Hadith Jibril has been narrated by 10 different rijals. So we could say it's Hadith mutawatir, though some of the chains are considered to be Sahih or some Hasan. Nonetheless, we could say at least Ma'nawi, and meaning Hadith Jibril is a mutawatir report, right? So this is it's beyond just rigorously authenticated. It's wide transmission, but the tartib of Hadith Jibril mentions what is faith first, or mel iman. This is basically the fundamentals of like being a Muslim 101. What a Muslim must understand, must believe in, and must understand. This is a starting point of the tarbiyah, starting with tawheed, right? Knowing that Allah is the necessary existence, and nothing can come into existence except through the will of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. That Allah is the one who set the balance of everything. He is the determiner of what is just and unjust, of what is right and what is wrong. He is the author of objective truth, not people. People are not the authors of truth. It can't be, oh, speak your truth. You have your truth, I have my truth, and he has his truth, and they're all equally true. That's normally not true, right? So this is an issue. This is an iqtiqadi issue. This is an issue of belief and faith, right? And this informs worldview, right? Then a person must know their fard ayn from a fiqh perspective, which is then called what is submission, or mel Islam, right? This relates to the 5 pillars, right? And then the last of those is what is spiritual beauty, right? Mel ihsan, right? What is ihsan? It is to worship Allah as if you see Allah. If you do not see Allah, know that Allah sees you. This relates to the inward sciences of ilm suluk wal akhlaq, right? Of spiritual welfare and working on our inward selves, to work on our spiritual diseases and ridding ourselves of spiritual diseases in which there are knowledge cures and action cures. As the scholars of Tazkiyah mentioned, al-ilajul ilmi wa ilajul amali. There is the knowledge cure and the action cure, and the difference is in the sequence of the lam and the mim, right? So this is just the basic tarbiyah that we should be expecting all Muslims, not to be a scholar, right? Just the basics of what we should be studying and going through. And there should be some sort of institute and some sort of standards, so that when people are in Muslim organizations, organizing, activism, or if they're working for an Islamic charity, just like we would say, oh, they need to have gone to university to be a lawyer, or to study this particular discipline, to be the accountant, or to be the executive director, right? That they should have had some sort of secular education. We should make some sort of demands and qualifications in which there's some sort of ijaza or some sort of certificate is given, or at least Fulan bin Fulan or Fulana bint Fulan has gone through this level of literacy to work and be seen as a bona fide community organizer or activist, right? Then the person who's leading it and the board president should study some usul fiqh. And I'm not the only one that has said this, by the way. I've heard Sheikh Hamza Yusuf say something similar, that this is something, usul fiqh is something good to give people a worldview. And I mentioned Sheikh Hamza Yusuf because I have respect for him and what he started at Zaytuna College. Is not saying I agree with all of his politics before someone tries to put that in the comment section. Like,
you will get comments
in the UAE. I don't agree. I don't agree with that, and some other statements. But I have love for Sheikh Hamza. And Sheikh Hamza did a lot for the Dawah of Islam in the West, and we need to be able to be merciful with each other, even when we disagree. And that goes for people who are propagating voting for Kamala Harris. You know, I love them, though I disagree with them on that. You know, so that's the reason I talked about the tarbiyah. I actually mentioned Imam Tom when he was here in Michigan. I said, Maulana, maybe we should start something called Tarbiyah Institute.
Brilliant.
And people come through a program. Some start online perhaps, and then when people get their final certification, need to come and spend some time, some summer months interning, and before they get their actual certificate of completion. And then these are the people that maybe go work in the Islamic organizations in the UK or in Canada or in America or in Australia. You know, they go through something from people like the fakir who studied, you know, some of the Islamic tradition, or people such as Ustad Zainab Ansari, who teaches at Taysir Seminary, or someone like that. Honorable sister, and we have honorable sisters who study this tradition too. It's not just the brothers with beards. We have sisters, who can contribute to this as well.
Exactly. I think that's a really good idea. I think young people in particular are crying out for a course or a series of courses where they can equip themselves with the knowledge and know-how to engage in political activism. So I would highly recommend and advise that this would be fantastic. And I think maybe as well, Imam Tom also has, as well as yourself, has a good grasp of Western ideology, and so as part of that, there is a need to engage with those ideas in order to, for one of a better term, immunize people from some of their excesses. So I think that's a really, really great.
Definitely. And just mention that Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mastered philosophy before he wrote the Incoherence of the
Yeah,
Philosophers. And
yeah,
likewise, there needs to be people who take time and dissect the problems in neo-Marxism, and Karl Marx and Engels, or like Foucault and postmodernism and some of these other intellectual trends, so
yeah.
that when people, come across these in activism spaces or on university campuses, they can pick up the aroma or the scent. Because right now, because many people don't know and haven't had these dissected, it's almost like having long haul COVID-19 side effects, where some people had COVID-19, they lost their smell of sense, they lost their sense of smell, or lost their sense of taste. Well, sometimes Muslims, we can't even smell or taste when we're under neo-Marxism or under postmodernism, right? We can't even smell it or taste it. And so I think that what you're saying about dissecting that's something that Imam Ghazali did. That's something that Ibn Taymiyyah did. And so I'm 100% in agreement with you on that.
Well, Jazakallah khair. There's one last question actually I have for you, away from the immediacy of electoral politics and what may or may not happen on November the 5th. Gaza has, of course, woken a lot of us up and has made us much more aware of our obligations, has made us less complacent about ourselves and where we are in the West, and made us realize that in many ways we belong closer to our ummah, and we have a stronger relationship with our ummah than we do with the Western systems and the ideologies of the West. I think in a way there is some good that has come out of this, but of course it's a tragedy, and many of us find it very difficult to sleep, find it very difficult to focus, find it very difficult to think about even the trivialities of life that we're accustomed to, because of what our brothers and sisters are going through. I mean, can you give some words of advice really I think to all of us really who are feeling that pain and find it very difficult to do very much else sometimes because of the horrendous pain our ummah is going through in Gaza?
So a few practical pieces of advice. Number one, in Athar, there's narrated in several different books where Allah reportedly said to Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, and also some of the Sayyidina Dawud alayhi salam, that reportedly Allah Azza wa Jal said, I am with those whose hearts are broken on my account. And part of the, we can say part of the divine wisdom behind ibtila, behind these trials, right, that we're going through, as mentioned by Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani in his book Fatul al-Ghaib. Ibn Taymiyyah did a commentary on, is that these severe trials and these tests, that it breaks us from our over-dependence on asbab, on material means, right? That we put all of our trust, oh, if I only had more money, I could do this.
Yeah.
Right? If I only had more political clout, I could do this. Or also breaking one over reliance on al-khalq, meaning the creation, but specifically people. Oh, if I only had this many more people, right, organizing with us, if I only had this many more allies, right, that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala sends us through these to say, all of your college degrees and your medical degrees, all of your money, all of your political connections can't stop this genocide. So then we go and run towards the one who is the real doer of good and the real cause of change, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, instead of placing our faith in asbab. So number one, in the last third of the night, we all should be waking up at tahajjud time, going from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, brokenhearted, asking for forgiveness and asking for him to rectify this ummah. And not in a transactional way. Allah doesn't owe us anything, right? We go in front of him brokenhearted. And if we do this sincerely, we're going to see real change. Number two, in regards to the state of our hearts and worries, the Prophet ﷺ gave us two pieces of advice. And we won't go through the entire hadith, the first one because of time, but it relates to the honorable companion Ubay ibn Ka'b radhiyallahu anhu, where at the end of the hadith, he asked the Prophet ﷺ, said, well, what if all of my prayer, all of my supplication was for you, Messenger of Allah? He said, it would suffice to forgive you of your sins and to remove ilham, to remove your worries. Asad al-Nabi. So to say frequently, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad, etc., like we say in our 5 daily prayers. So it is common, and we were taught from our teachers that we should try to do this at least 1,000 times every day. To sit and take some time to do 1,000, and on Jum'ah, we increase it. So Jum'ah night, which is Thursday night, after Maghrib, before Fajr time on before Fajr time on Friday, 1,000 times. Or in Urdu, I think you say Durud Sharif. There's different formulas of this. There's not one formula. Satul Ibrahimiyya is a good formula, but there's others. It could be Satul Fatih or any other formula. 1,000 times at night, 1,000 times a day minimum. And then 80 times after Satul Asr. Also, from the jewels of Jannah, the Prophet said, alayhi salam, is saying, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-azim. This also removes ilham. This helps remove worries. Meaning what? That there is no power nor might except with Allah, who is the lofty and the magnificent. Right? Meaning there's no empowerment but from other than Allah. Right? So we should say this office. And there's no tawfiq except through obedience to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Which means also it's a reminder we should not expect success for ourselves in this life, including for Palestine, or in the next life, going outside of the Sharia. All right? There's no success, no tawfiq. Okay? So these are things that are spiritual. Also, I would say, try to if not 3 or 4 hours before going to bed, try to look at the news. Get off your phone, stop looking at your phone, put your phone on Do Not Disturb, and try to settle your heart, or to do something leisurely. Read Qur'an, talk with your family, do something with your children if you have children. Take your mind off of things. For the first 9 months of the genocide, I was only getting 2 to 3 hours of sleep. It was affecting my health. My blood pressure skyrocketed. I went to my doctor, Dr. Nishat Hakim, may Allah bless her. And she, part of the advice she told me was to stop looking at your phone. You do so much work. It's hard. Get off your phone and take some valerian root and a half an hour before you're going to bed, from time to time, to help you sleep, and get some proper rest. The other is that besides rest, which I mentioned, and selling the heart, is to try to eat right and get some exercise. Our bodies are an amana, and we can't neglect our bodies and the right that Allah has over us in regards to this amana that He gave us, because of looking at world events. We need to take care of our health and eat properly and try to get some sort of exercise. So hence, I used to be an athlete and I was slacking and working out, but I've been back to, lifting weights, again, the last few months, and trying to get some exercise to practice what I preach. So, there's things for the spirit, as well as things for the mind and things for the body that can all help us during this very difficult time of genocide. But I believe, my brothers and sisters in Islam, that with Allah's permission, there's a great revival coming. Inshallah, a great revival. We have to remember, in the first crusade in Palestine, in Jerusalem to be specific, but in that area, in 5 weeks, the Crusaders killed, according to Ibn al-Athir, 70,000 people. And there was no drones, there were no cluster bombs, there was no white phosphorus. 70,000 people, some Jews, majority of them Muslims, slaughtered by the Crusaders. Muslims could not pray in Al-Masjid al-Aqsa for almost 98 years. Despite the occupation, there's Salat al-Tarawih every night in Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. There's Khutbah al-Jum'ah there every night. All 5 prayers are being held for the most part. Muslims couldn't pray there for almost 98 years. There was a crucifix in Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Right? But from that era produced the likes of Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani al-Hanbali, one of his chief students, Muwafiq ad-Din ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi al-Hanbali. Right? And it was a great time for spiritual revival. The establishment of the Fatwa guilds took place during this time. And although Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani did not live to see Al-Quds liberated, a large percentage of the men in Salahuddin al-Ayyubi's army came from the tarbiyah of Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani. So he gets a portion of that. And, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? We've seen our ummah at low points, and we've seen how we've risen. And it's returning back to our tradition. It's learning our deen. It's khidmah. It's doing service for the poor, feeding the poor, and waking up in the last third of the night, begging Allah. We have the formula already, and we've seen its success. So I'm very hopeful. I'm not pessimistic at all.
Imam Dawud, Walid, that's wonderful advice, and Jazakallah khair, and I'm looking forward to meeting you.
Inshallah ta'ala.
Barakallahu feek. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Please remember to subscribe to our social media and YouTube channels, and head over to our website thinkingmuslim.com to sign up to my weekly newsletter. Jazakallah khair.